Farrah. Welcome to my show, Fix Your Reflection First. I have had a wealth of life experiences, both good and bad, like everyone, and the one thing I have learned is that I am wholly responsible for the results. As I have evolved to liking the person I see in the mirror, my life has changed for the better, and that is what I help those that I coach do too. Please tune in every week as I will coach folks, listen to stories of success, and give you the tips and tools I have learned to make sure what you see is something you love and help you fix your reflection first. Welcome to Fix Your Reflection First and Live Your Best Life Ever. I'm your host, Rhonda Farrah, and this is Transformation Talk Television Radio Network. Our program, Fix Your Reflection First and Live Your Best Life Ever, is dedicated to awakening hearts, minds, and most especially spirit to our innate power from within, our authentic power from within, that power to thrive and not merely survive. Wherever you are in life right now, if you are not living the life you want to be living, the life you desire, perhaps the life that you dream about, you have come to the right place. So happy that you joined us today as we explore how we may be more mindful and make better choices to living our best life ever. And today we welcome special guest, Katie Oman. And let me tell you briefly about Katie, and she'll tell you a little bit more about herself. Katie Oman is a women's empowerment coach, motivational speaker, and event organizer. She's also an author of 9 books to date and a book coach, where she's helped 17 women write and publish their own books. She's passionate about lifting women up to recognize their own magic and power in whichever way she can. The title of today's episode is Kintsugi. This is the Japanese term for mending broken pottery with gold. It's relevant because Katie has had to find the magic when things looked very broken in her life. And Katie Oman's life has more ups and downs than a roller coaster. But in and amongst the chaos, she found the most important thing of all, her sense of self. Welcome, Katie Oman.
Thank you, Rhonda, for having me on as a guest. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I feel all like, oh, I'm pretty cool.
It's all true and well-deserved, and that I've had the pleasure of speaking with you on a couple of occasions. So welcome to Fix Your Reflection First. So that we all can learn more about how to live our best life ever. So we all can learn that transformation, that's transmuting, if you will, that you've become an expert at. Tell us about what the roller coaster is.
Oh, Rhonda, my life has been crazy. I mean, I am 43 next month. And if I look at my life so far, it's beyond mad, but I know it's all happened for me, and I can recognize that now because it allows me to help everybody else. But I mean, I started my journey. I was born in a little place called Merseyside, which is opposite Liverpool. For those that everyone knows Liverpool, right? The Beatles and all of that. And I'm a child, quite a nice normal upbringing, really, to start off with. And then my parents got divorced when I was 8. And we moved 250 miles away, my mother and I, and started again. The only person I knew apart from my mum was my auntie and my uncle and my cousin. So I literally had to, at 8 years old, with this funny accent, had to go and start my life again and find my place and leave my dad, which was quite a wrench, actually. Although I chose to be with my mum, it was quite difficult, and I've done a lot of work on that. But then I went to an all-girls high school in my teenage years, and it was awful. I generally think that people shouldn't be in same-sex schools. I don't really agree with them from my personal experience. I suffered psychological and emotional bullying every day for 4 years. to the point that I'd seriously considered not being here anymore. I didn't go through with it because it's a funny thing to say, but I didn't think I was brave enough to go through with it. But seriously thought about it because they just wanted it to stop, and it was awful. But I mean, since that point, I mean, once I left school and tried to kind of get my life as a grown up, thinking that, well, adults know what they're doing, right? Adults have it all figured out. Adults have the plan. And I was like, I don't know what my plan is. I like genuinely was like, I was just drifting along like some aimless little boat on the river with no compass, no sail, no map, just trying to figure it out and failing miserably. Or so I thought. And looking for answers in all the wrong places. And yet everything I tried just left me feeling really hollow, really shallow. I couldn't figure it out. And again, thought that I was the problem, right? As a lot of us do. In hindsight, I realize now that a lot of people feel that way. But of course, when you're going through it, you think it's just you, of course. And it wasn't really until 2010 where my life changed in a very dramatic way. Now, I know in hindsight that there have been whispers for me to change my life before that time, but I've been ignoring them. Because I think when you're in the comfort zone of your life, even if it's uncomfortable, it still feels more comfortable to stay than it does to make a change, right? Because the unknown is terrifying. And so you're thinking, well, I'm not happy, but at least it's knowable, right? Absolutely. So the universe, I believe, after a while gets a little bit fed up because you're not listening, and so pulls the rug. And I call that the tower moment, which comes from the tarot, which I've read for a long, long time. And I mean, it was awful, and it is awful. But very sadly, my grandparents tragically died after an arson attack on where they were living. My granddad's mobility scooter was set on fire. Turned out to be a young man who had learning difficulties, and he was coerced into it by another group of boys. They managed to get them both out. The fire brigade did, but they both passed away the next day from the smoke-related injuries. And it was horrendous. To say that it devastated the family does not go far enough to explain what that was like. And unless you've been through something like that, it's really hard to understand just how much it pulls the rug out from underneath you, because you are dealing with multiple things at the same time. So not only have you got the shock, because it was so unexpected, of course, and then you've got intense grief of losing two people on the same day. But you've also, because of the nature of how it happened, you then got a police investigation. And because then the media caught wind of it, we had literally had journalists and photographers at the end of the street trying to get a story. So you're trying to deal with private grief in a very public way. And it's incredibly difficult, trying to keep everybody together, trying to deal with all the different parts, because you've also got to deal with all the things of death around that as well. So you've got to think about, wills and bank accounts and funeral arrangements. And it was just like an absolute whirlwind. And amongst all of that, I find that when you go through an intense period of grief and trauma, actually what it does, from my experience, because it's not the only time that I've experienced something like that, is it makes you very reflective. It makes you really stop and catch a breath. Even in the pain, even in the trauma, I at least become very questioning of myself and what I'm doing. And I realized how deeply unhappy I was with my life and how much I wanted to change. I didn't know what that looked like at that point, but I knew I wanted change, which was definitely a first. I was like, okay, I'm not happy. And I was admitting it to myself, which can sometimes be one of the hardest steps, right? It's like, I have to go, okay, yeah, I think something's got to give here. Now, at the same time, wonderfully synchronistically, I met a friend of my mom's who was a psychic medium. And the first words out of her mouth were not, hi, or how are you? She went, you can do what I can do, And I was like, excuse me? Right, pardon. But I mean, like most teenagers, I'd had a passing interest in the paranormal, but I wasn't something I'd ever kind of jumped into. But she worked with me for a year, and helped me to tap into my intuition, to develop my skills, and really started me on the path. I mean, that was 14 years ago. And I truly believe that that ignition led me to being where I am now.
You were willing to change.
Yes. And I think you have to be. I think, people talk about, I want something, but I don't know what it is. And I think even the acknowledgement that I want something more than this has to move you somewhere.
Yes.
Because
yes.
you have to be open-minded enough and open enough to go, something more than this.
Yes. And I think many of us have been in the position where we put out an intention, or we want something better for our life, yet we become squeamish because it's like, well, I don't know how that could happen. And instead of don't worry about the how, is what I teach and what I practice.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry about the how. What is it that you want?
Yeah.
And then the how shows up. Now, we still have free will. We still have choice. Mm-hmm. So do we take the how up on it and move forward? But when we're willing to change, all of a sudden we start to get more ready to change. And those are two important ingredients.
Absolutely. My mentor, she said that to me. She said, our job here is what and why. So what do you want and why do you want it? Right? Because you have to know the why. Otherwise, it could be somebody else's why, right? You have to know what your why is. Right. And then the universes, spirits, gods, whatever you want to call it, to me, it doesn't matter. It's all the same energy. Their job is how and when. And of course, then the issue with that is that human time and human impatience, that's when we're like, yeah, I want it and I want it now. Because it doesn't always work like that. It's a process, right?
Process. And we are in an immediate gratification society. Absolutely. And I come to that. I am not immune to that either. And it's interesting. Would you mind if I shared how I met you?
No, of course.
I met Katie because I don't dabble in the tarot, but I have one or two favorite tarot readers. I went to one of them, and online, I was listening, and I saw like an advertisement, and it was Katie. And of course, her name is Oman. What an Oman. Oman, it's spelled. And then I find she's not only has written her own books, but she coaches people to write books. And of course, I was being led by spirit to this, because I've been putting off a book for years now based on my story. And I made an appointment with you. We got on a video together, and I told you this. This is why I'm here, because I don't believe in coincidence, accident, or happenstance one bit. So our paths crossed at the right time, and divine right time, I will say. And that's what we'll be doing. But here's the other thing, too, is who says God doesn't have a sense of humor? So if all the people I could meet to write my book, I don't go to a tarot reader to say, well, who shall I get to write my book? You were just there. And I said, okay, I get it. I get it. And this is what people let go of the how, let go. And that was not just my subconscious mind speaking, because the subconscious knows 95% of what's happening. That was what I call my superconscious mind. Yeah. Even better, it's my godling self. So I listened, and here we are.
And that's the thing, isn't it? It's always, can you trust enough to walk the path, even if you can't see where you're going? It always reminds me of that scene from Indiana Jones, where he's standing on the ledge, and there's the chasm, and then there's the other ledge on the other side, and it's like he knows. Well, at first he's like confused and slightly anxious, going, well, how do I get over there? And then he realizes he has to step out. It's literally a leap of faith. And when he does, eventually, of course, then the bridge forms underneath his feet. And I talk about this. I believe in spiritual breadcrumbs, I call them, right?
Yeah.
So a couple of years ago, I was invited to a talk, and it was the first day the kids went back to school, and it was free, and it was very random, very out of the blue. And so I thought, fine. And I went to listen to this amazing woman, and she was talking about how can you show up in a bigger way for yourself in your goals and your purpose, and really push it. And from there, I kind of leaned into this dream that I had, and I admitted it. And then that then led me to explore that. And I found this charity up in Liverpool, and they directed me back to where I live. I had a chat with the business organization, and they introduced me to a women's empowerment event here. And I couldn't go because it was the same day that I was working, but I introduced myself to the lady running it. And a couple of hours later, I got an email back saying, this lady's left, but I want to talk to you. And it was a woman who I was friends with 4 years ago, who I'd lost touch with. And it was her business. And from there, not only have I put on an event where I live, but I'm now their events director for the whole company. And so that is like, I mean, I never expected that to happen, but that shows you if you're brave enough to have faith and trust and follow those breadcrumbs with an open mind, I think you never really know where it's going to take you.
And in some cases, to a better place than you ever imagined.
Absolutely, of course. And it is letting go of the expectation, and those things of going, this is how it has to be, this is how it needs to be. And I think that narrow-mindedness of that blinkered vision can really be a huge block for us, because again, God always has a better plan for us than we can ever imagine for ourselves. We just have to trust that. And sometimes that's the hardest bit, I think, is actually having faith, because of course your brain has this negativity bias that does the worst case scenarios really well. And so to actually have faith that it could go well sometimes feels a lot harder than believing it can go right.
Yes. What is now you've written and published 9 books of your own.
Yes.
What's your favorite?
It's funny. It's a good question. And the reason I laugh is because my favorite book you can't actually get anymore.
Okay.
I'll explain why. So my favorite book that I have ever written was my teaching memoir. I wrote it in 2019, and it came out just before COVID in February 2020. And it was called Self-Love Pledge. And it was published by a British publishing company. Like it wasn't nothing wrong with self-publishing. I think self-publishing is great. But there is something, I think, if you're a writer, that's quite nice to be like, I've been like properly published. And I was very proud of it. And it was really my journey from very low self-esteem, very low sense of worth, to learn how to love myself, and the impacts of those two things, and also practices and exercises for the reader. And it was very raw, very personal, very vulnerable. It was one of the most real things I've ever written in my life. I cried writing it. It was like I'd gone to places I hadn't spoken about before. And as part of my publishing contract, there's a bookstore here in London called Watkins, which is one of the oldest bookstores in the world. And they have a thing where the day before it comes out, you can go down there and give a talk about the themes of the book, and you can sign some. It's like an unofficial launch, right? And then they film it and they put it on the YouTube channel. So I was so excited. I was buzzing, and I went down and I did my thing, and it was great. And came back to where I live and went to bed. Now my best friend lives in Florida. My best friend for 10 years. And so I wake up in the morning and she's blown me up. Like I've got about 10 messages on my phone, and I'm like, what? So and what had happened was, while I was asleep, my ex-husband and his cousin had come for me in the comments of that video with vitriol, and were really attacking me. And my best friend, being my best friend, was defending me to the absolute hill. Eventually the company turned the comments off. It's fine. Nothing else happened. The book started selling. I was getting lots of positive feedback. It was going really well. And life continued. And then about 15 months later, I was taking my twins on vacation for their birthday. And I had a phone call. I was getting ready from my publisher to say that they'd received an email from my ex-husband threatening to sue me for libel. And my heart fell into my feet because I'm a very classic overthinker and very visual. So in my head, I'm now behind bars in an orange jumpsuit and my kids are visiting me through glass. Like that is what's in my head. I'm panicking. Spoke to my publisher and they said it was just an email. And the thing was that I hadn't named him directly. And also the book's written in my maiden name, which is Oman. You wouldn't know who my ex-husband was unless you knew my surname, and then you could, I suppose, but it was nobody like well known or anything. And also everything I'd said was true. I wasn't slanderous. I didn't say anything, attacking, as it were. But obviously he didn't like the fact that he was in that book at all. And so he was threatening to sue me. And so you can only bring a libel case within 12 months of publication. So because of that video where he'd attacked me 15 months prior, I could prove that he knew about it because that's what he was saying. So he didn't know about it. And I could prove that he did, right? So it didn't go anywhere. It was just that email. That's all that happened. There was no lawyers things. There was no court case. There was nothing. It was just that email. But the publisher got frightened and they dropped the book and they gave me the rights back. And that hurt like hell. That was so painful because the book was so personal. It was like I'd been rejected personally. And it was something that I really had to sit and do a lot of healing on. The book itself still hasn't been republished. I feel like I want to rewrite it because, of course, that was 4 years ago and I'm now a different person to who I was 4 years ago. So I will rewrite it and bring it back out again at some point. But it was an amazing book for me to write because it was so personal. But also I can see now that even going through that experience actually was for me, even though I didn't recognize that at the time.
Right. So now you look at this experience, and what I hear you saying is that this was an experience where you're measuring your own emotional, your personal, your spiritual growth.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a catastrophe.
Yeah.
Back then. But now as you sit with it, it's given you some new opportunity.
Absolutely. And I say I'm a huge believer that everything happens for me now. I didn't recognize that when I was younger. And because now I help all these women with their stories, for me, it's now an experience that I can share. And I can go, look, if you're going to write a story and include other people, this is what you do. This is what you don't do, right? So in that sense, it's proven very useful. But it wasn't fun at the time, that's for sure.
How the women, you work primarily with women.
Yes.
Okay, and they have a story within them, and it needs, whether they publish it or not, it's good to write the story for your own healing. Would you agree with that?
I have a quote that I tell everybody, and I believe it fully. When you own the story fully, without shame or embarrassment, you release the shame that was never yours to carry in the first place.
Yes. Yeah.
And shame, I literally think that, the world has a huge, obviously, weight problem. I'm sure if we release shame, we'd all weigh a lot less. I'm convinced that shame actually has mass behind it because it's so heavy. Yes. And it really, even if you think, I've done my healing, I've done my work, I guarantee you're still carrying some, because we all do. And I think if you have to acknowledge that by owning who you are and owning your experience, the good, the bad, the ugly, the mistakes you've made, the people you've hurt, the times that you've messed up, I think you just have to own it because we're people and we are flawed, multifaceted, complex human beings. And that means that sometimes we mess up. Sometimes we get it wrong. Sometimes we make mistakes, but that's okay. It doesn't make us bad people. As long as you can kind of sit with it, I think, and own it and, apologize if you need to. Like, you're just on the journey like the rest of us,
Yes. So one of your biggest empowering, let's say, techniques is to not only help women, help all, but help women primarily release shame.
Yeah.
which I think is fostered. They work together. Shame's cousin is guilt.
Yeah.
We got shame and guilt working, especially in a woman's life. And what does that produce? But more shame.
Yeah.
And more. And
yeah.
When we've had conversations, you know that to release that, not, and within all that not so good stuff, that shit, if you will, in our lives, there is a gift and there is a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I've experienced it personally and all my not so good stuff, and as well as work with women to do just that. So,
yeah.
Well, talk to us about your gift and blessing in this whole scenario, this roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
That we all continue. I don't really like roller coasters, which is why I was again on.
It's a good analogy though for this, because you can kind of see, the ups and the downs and the twists and the dips, and it's a very good metaphor for life, I think. I don't like rides that go round and round, but that's just me. So for me, the blessing actually has been the relationship that I have with myself, and that's when I come back to that book that I wrote. When I didn't like myself, what I didn't realize at the time, it took me a really long time to get this, is that every single person in your life is your mirror. And when I say every single person, I mean every single person, even the lady who serves you in the shop. Like, every single person that you connect with in your life is mirroring back to you how you feel about yourself. We are all reflections of each other. And I didn't understand that for the longest time. So I was the absolute victim of life. I'm a nice person. I try and do good things. Why is people so mean to me? And I thought, if I was just nicer, if I was just kinder, if I was funnier, that somehow I would fix everything and people would be nicer, right? Like, I was responsible for everybody else, which is, you said it now, and it's such a stupid thing to say, but you believe, when you're in it, you believe that fully, right?
Right, of course.
Absolutely. And then the more I kind of moved through this, especially the last 10 years, I would say, 10 years, I can really what really started it all was the simple thought. To me, it was massive. And to other people, I can see why they're like, that's not a big deal. But to me, it was huge, because I'd never had this thought before. And the thought was, you are okay as you are. And it dropped into my head like an absolute boulder. And I just sat there grinning like some stupid idiot, because I was just like, oh yeah. But once I kind of got that thought, then it was kind of like, okay, how do I hold on to this feeling? How do I have this space with myself where I can feel this way all the time? And that's where I started this journey of, self-love and healing and nurturing and forgiveness and all these things. But the more I've done that for myself, the more it's rippled out into every area of my life. So not just the relationships I have with other people, friends, family, or whoever, but also it's impacted me in terms of my health, my career, my money, my well-being, my spirituality. Like, everything has been impacted by the relationship that I have with myself. And that's where I can see the blessing in the pain, because I truly believe, for me anyway, I think I had to almost go down to come back up again. We're doing that roller coaster again. I've always been someone, careful what you say, I have been someone that's learned lessons the hard way. So if you had told me this when I was like 18, 19, 20, I probably wouldn't have listened, and I definitely wouldn't have believed you, right? Now, I think I had to go through the challenge to come out the other side and to get to the place that I am now. And that's where I see the blessing, because I realize that I'm resilient, I'm strong, I'm caring, I'm clever. Like, I can see my own worth through the shadow, through the darkness, and what I've been through.
So your reflection of Katie has changed since you look in your mirror. You've, as I say, fixed your reflection first, and you are living your best life ever, with even more best ever to come.
Absolutely. And I say to people, look, self-love is an ongoing, lifelong journey. It's not a one-time get to an end point and you're great and you never have to worry about it ever again. Right? It's the rest of your life. And I say to people, some days I am Gollum and some days I am Beyonce. And that's fine. Because on my Gollum days, I used to spiral down for like days, weeks, months. I would be in a self-shame, self-hate spiral that I couldn't get out of. Now I go, Katie, you're just having a bad day. We'll try again tomorrow. Right? And it's fine because it's okay to not be okay. It's just not okay to unpack your stuff and live in that space.
And that's empowering to realize that.
Yeah, massively. Massively. So yeah, it's definitely been an interesting thing. I think what's interesting for me is to go, I can help other people, even though not every aspect of my life is fixed and sparkly. I have had clients where they go, I want to do what you do, but I still have issues. And I'm like, so do I. Like anybody that tells you that, you know, they figured it all out and everything is great, run from that person because they're either a liar or they're a narcissist, right? Like just run. We're all trying to figure out life. We're all trying to figure out ourselves. We're all trying to figure out each other. And we all still have issues and it's fine. The issue is, are you working on yourself? Are you aware of it? Are you trying to do better? And I think that's the key thing. Whereas rather than being like the ostrich in the sand and just burying your head and just, you know, now it's like you have to be self-aware. You have to be self-reflective. You have to, you know, now you know better, you do better. But to give yourself grace in that space as well. Because we are people and, you know, some days you are going to get it wrong. Some days you are going to make a mistake and it's okay. It's like you say, it's just learning from it and moving forward.
And those mistakes, that we call it all forward. And I know people get irritated with me when I say that. And I take responsibility. That not so good stuff I have called forward in my life. We call it forward so that we can learn the lessons. If we don't learn them the first time, they keep coming back and with different clothing on and different names and different faces so that we can learn whatever lessons. But the biggest part in that is we get to choose. We get to decide what we want to do about it.
Absolutely.
Someone comes and says, my life sucks, you know, well, what do you want to do about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I say to people, you know, I think that there is this kind of belief that life is kind of a straight line, well, maybe a wobbly line, but like you're born over here and you die over here and stuff happens in the middle. To me, life is actually like an ice cream cone. It's the points at the bottom and it gets wider towards the top. And the idea is that the lessons we came here to learn, that there are missions and our goals, you actually will go through it multiple times. But the idea is that you're supposed to spiral up. So you go through it quicker and better because you've learned, right? But the thing is that the problem comes that most people don't get that. So they spend most of their life on the bottom rung, just going round and round and round and round and round in like a perpetual circle. You're supposed to go through. And I've had that. People go to me, but I've dealt with this. I've moved through this. Why is it showing up again? And I'm like, because it's supposed to. That's the whole point, right? Because it shows that you've grown. It shows that, you know, you've moved forward.
So how do people get a hold of you for questions, or if they have a book in them or they're wondering, should I write this book? How would people reach you?
My website is like, I make it as simple as possible now because I think people, you know, people like it just, you know, on a plate. So my website is KTIE Oman, which is like the country, OMAN.co.uk. And all of my stuff's on there, all of my offerings, all of my services, and you can contact me through there. You can also find me on Instagram, is my #1 platform, and that's KT Oman and 1111, 4 ones. So you can find me on there and DM me, email me, message me. I'm open to having chats with everybody, so that'd be great.
And all this information will be in our episode description, but I wanted Katie to tell you that now. Okay, so here's a question before we close. If someone is thinking about writing their story, their book, what's the best advice, if you will, to give them?
The best advice is to sit down, and from my experience, this is what I tell people, is to literally mind map, or I mean, I'm a child of the 90s, we used to call it brainstorming, but mind map your life. Like just the key bits that you want to write and just throw it all down, whether you do that on a computer. I mean, I'm old school. I like the whole thing of like vision boarding and, you know, having something visual in front of me that I've created. But you need the key moments that you can see, because the idea is that you need to understand your structure. You need to understand where the line is, right? And what you want to include and what is extraneous. And so you can't see that unless you can see that. I'm so visual. I'm like, no, you have to see it, because then you see how it all joins together and where that red thread is that will carry you through it. So I would literally start by just like literally just write everything down from as much as you want to include. And of course, I think it's important to know that you don't have to include everything. Like, I don't need to know what you had for dinner last Tuesday unless it's important, right? Like, you don't have to tell me what color socks you've got on. You don't have to write down everything, right? But it's those key moments that you think, this is important. This is something that I want to talk about. And then once you see it, like I say, then you can see the thread, and then you can see your structure, and then you can think, okay, this is what the book's about. Because sometimes we don't even know what the book is until we can see those dots to dots kind of thing, you know?
And one more thing before we close, because I have experienced this and conveyed it to you, for those who feel squeamish about telling their story, what words of wisdom can you share with us?
You can't control other people's reactions. They're not in your control at all. We wish they were sometimes, I think, but they're not. The only person that you're in control of is yourself, right? And so the good, the bad, the ugly, you're not in control of any of that. What you can do is tell your story. And to be honest with you, as a creative, as an artist, because you're painting with words if you're writing a book.
Yes.
The reader is a co-creator of that story. And we forget that, because it's like, well, this is what I want to say, this is what I mean. But the reader will put on the inference of their own stuff, so their own experiences, their own beliefs, their own limitations. They will put that onto your story. And so what they see in there is actually also a reflection of themselves, right? It's that thing of like, if the shoe fits, right? So if they're seeing things and they have an issue, really, that's more about them than it is about you. But I think as long as you can tell your truth and you're owning that with authenticity and honesty, then what anybody else says about that is their business, not yours.
Okay, well, that is wisdom. Wisdom from Katie Oman, who's our pleasure to have here on Transformation Talk Television Network. So in closing, here's the reminder. Regardless of whatever struggle, whatever challenge, the not so good stuff you are facing, we all have the opportunity, if we choose, to let it all serve us. Yes, you heard me. The not so good stuff can serve us rather than anything less. So whatever tunnel you happen to be traveling down these days, that light that you may be seeing at the end of the tunnel is not a train coming at you. That light is the guidance. It's the opportunity to move forward and to be the best version of yourself. So thank you for joining us, Katie Oman, today. Viewers, thank you for joining us. I'm Rhonda Farrah. You have been listening to Transformation Talk Television Radio Network. So until next time, have a beautiful day every day. And as I invite you all to do, treat life as if it were ice cream and enjoy it before it melts. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, viewers. See you next time.
Thank you, Rhonda. Bye.
I'm Rhonda Farrah, and you have been listening to Fix Your Reflection First. Tune into Transformation Talk Radio every first and third Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific Time for success stories of folks I have coached. I will be sharing more of my tips and tools that you can use to love the person you see in the mirror and how to fix your reflection first. Live your best life ever by choosing to be bold and courageous, even if it means getting out of your comfort zone. To connect with me, visit helpmerhondanow.com.